started with a snapshot of where we are today. The energy industry, we heard a little bit about this in the last session, is really in a state of transition, and I think NRG well encapsulates that. You've spoken a lot about the ways in which your company has invested in renewables, but the company is still 95% oil, gas, fossil fuel. Coal and natural gas. Help us understand how the industry is going to change over the coming decades and what that really is going to mean for right now.
The poll of who wants wireless charging.
Oh, that would be smart.
First of all, I would say
I almost wanted to just step in and be like,
I
what?
am not a millennial.
No, it's okay.
I don't know, because there's a lot of work on the last round on what constitutes a millennial, but I'm well past that. I think there's a whole generation between me and millennials. But,
Thank you.
So the short answer I'd say is I don't know exactly how the industry has to change.
Not down this way. Steph is.
I don't know exactly how the industry will change, but I would say that I would rephrase it as, if we're going to deal with the greatest crisis that the millennials are likely to face, it has to change. And when it comes to changing, even though I run a Fortune 250 energy company, I would say there's sort of two schools of thought. There are people trying to get it to change and saying, let's work with the established players to make it change. And I'm saying that I don't think that's going to work because the type of world, the type of clean energy solutions, distributed solutions, which don't build themselves, which don't fit readily into the business model that the American energy industry is based on today, there is literally nothing you can offer an establishment energy company in the United States today which is better than maintaining the status quo. Because you're talking in terms of the electricity industry about people who've been granted by the various states of the United States a monopoly. And in the capitalist system, if someone grants you a monopoly and you don't have to compete with anybody, that's nirvana. I had the opportunity a couple years ago to meet with Warren Buffett. And he when you're 88 or whatever he is, you can say whatever you want. He said to me at one point, because the funny thing is, like, I'm considered like the greatest capitalist in this country. He goes, and I hate competition. He goes, I want to invest in companies that have been granted monopoly, natural, unnatural monopolies, and that's what the power industry is. And if you start getting into a world where people start providing their own energy on their houses, and it's not part of the rate-based, centralized grid system utility structure, that's just not good for the status quo company. So you have to think disruptive.
All right, so you, in the manner of sort of thinking about disruption and change, you recently wrote an open letter to college students, to millennials. It was published across a number of different college newspapers, really asking them to act and really push for accountability among both public sector and private sector leaders. But what I think is potentially interesting is that for many right now, the most visible sign of action on college campuses is the campaign for divestment from public fossil fuel companies, which is something that you do not support. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, okay. So this is my theory of leadership, and I'm interested in history and all that. And just to put it simply, if you think of generations in 25-year terms, then the generation of leadership we have in the United States today is the 10th generation of American leadership. And if you think that, if you believe in American exceptionalism, which I do, but not in the way it's used by the right wing of the political spectrum, you think that what has made America great over the previous 9 generations is that generation of American leadership rose and overcame the greatest challenge of its time. If you think of 2000 to 2025, the 10th generation, our generation of leadership really hasn't done much other than make itself rich. And you would think that what we could do, because climate change is an intergenerational issue, those of you in the room in your early 20s, in the year 2050, when the world scientists tell us we got to get carbon emissions down by 80%, you'll be the same age then that I am now. And, I may look to you, and I said this in the letter, like I'm almost dead. But at 56 years old, I think I got a lot of years left. And when you're 56, trust me, you'll want to have years left, and you don't want to be looking at beachfront property in Missouri. My sense is that, that our generation is well on its way to failing the next generation in terms of at least getting the ball rolling on doing something. So I wrote that letter a little bit in frustration to the college students, saying, look, in the perfect world, you would have your time to be young and do all the stuff that young people do, and we would be getting this going, and then you would, with all your skills, all your education, all your, disruptive technology, you would be, carrying on. But there's a chance that you're going to be working from a standing stop, when you all take over. And so that's what I said. Now, the reason what I said, a little bit more nuanced than you put it about the divestment campaign, is I actually happened to have gone to college during the time where college campuses were focused on divestment from South Africa because of apartheid. And I mean, and as it happens, I mean, divestment and focusing on college, endowments to divest, I mean, it just will never work. On its face, it will never work. Because I will tell you, as someone who deals with fund managers all the time, fund managers, more than almost any other strata of society I deal with, certainly more than CEOs, and I would rather not be quoted on this if there's anyone. It's an amoral profession. It's all about the return. There's one thing in my job I care about more than doing something about climate change, and of course, serving the shareholders' interest in that is, and that's the safety of the people that work at NRG, the personal safety, and we are a heavy industry company where people work in dangerous situations. I've probably had 500 to 1,000 investor meetings in the 11 years I've been CEO of this company. Not once as a fund manager and owner of the company ever asked me about what I consider to be the single most important thing I do, in my everyday job. So to think that fund managers themselves will suddenly get corporations, fossil fuel companies to change their ways, that itself won't happen. But what is important and relevant about the divestment is that its impact on the hearts and minds of millennials. Because the United States is now in a period of energy abundance. And all the millennials will have something that my generation did not have. They'll have choice across the energy spectrum. And you will be able to make purpose-driven decisions with your consumption choices, even in the world of energy, where before the state basically told you where you got your electricity. You had one type of car you could drive, internal combustion engine vehicle. And you'll have choices. And if you choose to use those choices to not consume the energy products of companies that you don't like what they stand for, and that's supposed to be one of the traits of millennials, is that they want every consumer decision they make to be purpose-driven, you will change behavior in corporate America faster than you can possibly imagine. Because, I just read, I didn't actually study what a millennial was to come here, but I did read somewhere that millennials were formally defined as people born between the years 1984 and 2004, which makes them between 11 and 31 years old right now. 80 million people, largest generation in American history. Somewhat sometimes derided by consumer companies now for having no purchasing power, being indebted with educational funds and all that. But somewhere like within 4 years or something, the total purchasing power of the millennial generation will exceed the purchasing power of baby boomers. I don't know if that 4-year number is right, but sometime shockingly soon. Millennials will work their way out of educational poverty faster than you think. And look, I run a Fortune 250 company. I'm a die-in-the-wool capitalist. I believe that American capitalism, driven by the American consumer, can change the world. And so I think the best hope that we have for climate change is for millennials to basically vote with their purse or their wallet in terms of who they choose to have as their supplier.
And do you think those kinds of purposeful choices are available to consumers now? I mean, what if?
Well,
if,
I mean, so yeah, are they available? They are actually available, but the fundamental issue that we have is a question of awareness and caring. And one, and the question that came on the last panel was like, can you be anywhere and innovate and all that? Yeah, you can be anywhere, but you're really lucky here in Northern California because it's just in the water out here, how much innovation and worrying about this issue there is. But the issue that people in Northern California in particular have to be concerned about is you just reinforce yourselves. You just talk amongst yourselves, and you don't recognize that it's 15% of the American population, give or take, who are innovators and early adopters and who really want to do something about this. That's across the country, probably a significantly larger number in Northern California. There's 15% on the other end of the spectrum, what Simon Sinek would call laggards. You can't worry about them. The battle that we have to win, which no one has figured out, and hopefully someone in this room will figure out, is to win the 70% in the middle, the pragmatic environmentalists. And literally, they're more in the middle of the country. I come from Chicago, so this is meaningful to me, and I grew up during the Vietnam War, and it was called the silent majority. And, what got America out of the Vietnam was when the silent majority said they had had enough, and then it happened. And that's what we got to get the 70% in the middle to embrace the clean energy economy and the clean energy lifestyle, or the sustainable lifestyle. And for people who are thinking about what they want to do in their life, I would say I consider it the four points on the sustainability foundation is clean energy, tailpipeless transportation, doing something other than with waste, municipal solid waste, and what we do now, and also I should say human waste, and then and fresh water production. And that last one should be very meaningful to all of you in California right now. And just a little riff on that. I mean, it shocks me looking at California's distressed situation with water from the East Coast, that here you are on the energy side, you got all these people wringing their hands, oh my God, we're going to have too much renewable energy. We got this thing which in electricity circles called the duck's back or the duck's belly. And we don't know what we're going to do with all the solar power in the middle of the day. I got the answer to that. Make fresh water. Water doesn't care when it's made. Reverse osmosis desalination, the only input cost to it is electricity. So if you have zero marginal cost solar power, make fresh water, because if you think you're going to conserve your way out of the water crisis that California has, good luck.
So you mentioned a number of different sort of ways that we can think about how all of these different potential sources of energy play together for a solution. Mm-hmm. And earlier you mentioned sort of the word nuance. And I think in seeing some of the things you've written and spoken about over the past year, there's a lot of nuance to what needs to occur to create change. So how would you suggest that the people in this room who can help to create change, how can they get smart on this issue, given that there is a lot of nuance and there's a lot of challenge to be had in the process?
Well, I don't think it's nuanced to millennials. I mean, stuff in millennial world, as I understand, goes viral all the time. The question is, how do we make this issue go viral? Because I first got interested in electric cars, and particularly the Tesla Roadster, because I thought, oh, this is exciting. People like to drive. One of the things as an electricity provider, historically, we have served the stationary environment, and oil led to transportation, and people are much more in control and mindful of their energy use when they're in a car than they are when they're in a house. When you flip on a switch, mm-hmm. It's a completely evaporative experience. The only reason you think about your person who's providing the electricity is if the switch doesn't, go on, and then you're mad. Right. That's my world.
Right. Well, people think about energy, 6 to 9 minutes a year, their energy.
Yeah, I guess the O-Power guys say that the amount of decision-making bandwidth you have in the average American consumer's mind right now is 6 minutes a year. And that's hard to.
Some say 9, so you have
Yeah.
a whole 9 to work
Yeah,
with in other cases.
but I mean, and so one of the things I would say is, we've got the, there are people working in the technology, the material sciences, all the things. I mean, we are so far advanced in terms of what clean energy can put in the market today from 5 years ago, but what the energy segment desperately lacks is someone who understands how humans interact with energy use, because no one's ever studied it. So I sort of say, it seems like a soft science, but what we really need is clinical psychologists or anthropologists or someone to sort of say, how are we going to get people to care about this? Because, look, I run an electricity company, and I don't wake up in the morning and say, darn it, I can't wait to jump over that light switch and turn on the light so I can consume my own company's product, I may jump over and turn on the light so I can see, but the electricity isn't what's animating me. So that's why I'm actually very interested in seeing what happens here in California as a result of this water crisis, because when you are in the business of providing a fundamental human need that humans actually don't think about very much, the power of the negative catalyst is huge. I mean, we saw it on the East Coast during Superstorm Sandy, where for 2.5 weeks, all you got was, what are you doing? Where are you getting your electricity from? And then, like, within a week of it being restored, it was like it would never happen. So we have to look for positive catalysts, but we also have to be in a better position to say when negative catalysts happen that there's another way. Because doing what they did in New Jersey after Superstorm Sandy, which is rebuilt wooden poles, a wooden pole-based distribution system, is literally the dumbest thing a modern society, could do. And they were forced to do that because I don't know if you know this, but the FEMA rules say that if you want the federal government to pay for restoring of something after a natural disaster, you have to basically put back in place exactly what the government won't pay for improvements. So if you had wooden poles, you're going to get wooden poles again. Can you imagine a system that's that, and you can see why the government would do it, so that, improvements aren't off the back of taxpayers across the country when it's a crisis situation, but it makes no sense.
It does not make sense.
It
doesn't
yeah.
make sense. So actually, going along with that, I mean, you sort of brought up understanding the human element when it comes to thinking about how people consume and understand their energy usage. We have a number of people in technology in this room who probably think a lot about user experience and really think about sort of the psychology of the user.
Yeah.
So, and actually you've contrasted the energy industry as it exists today to tech and also specifically to telecom and sort of that transition that we've seen over the past 5 to 10 years. How can we think about the lessons that sort of the energy sector can learn from technology and telecom? And then maybe go there, and then maybe how can those who are here, who are in technology, think about enabling change within the energy industry?
Yeah, so let me the reason I draw the connection between telecom and the power sector today is because, I see very few people in the room that remotely, equate to me in age, but hopefully they'll support me on this. And in the 1970s, when people talked about their utilities, they talked about their power and their telecom company in one breath. And now telecom is part of the sexy, IT modern world that you all like, and we're still in the primordial ooze. And so one thing that interests me about the telecom industry is how Verizon and the new AT&T became the colossi that they are. Because when the old AT&T was broken up in 1984, the sleepiest, least sexy part of the breakup of the national AT&T were the 7 baby bells. Yet here we stand 30 years later, and the two companies that inherited the earth in the telecom space started as baby bells. So for anyone who's running a power company, and sometimes I get this label of a visionary. I'm like, no way I'm a visionary. I'm a historian. Is what did those two baby bells, Bell Atlantic and Southwest Bell, do from 1984 to 2014 to become the wildly successful companies they are? So I look at it on that front. The second thing that excites me about telecom, going to the opposite end and looking at it from the end-use consumer's perspective, is that, and this comes to sort of wireless charging. One of the societal trends is the world's going wireless. And the electric industry has to stop defining itself as serving the stationary environment, because this is the most important thing right now. And if you think that our industry now exists to basically energize this, let me ask for a quick show of hands. Without looking at your smartphone, how many people in the room know whether the amount of remaining charge they have on their smartphone is more or less than 50%? Yeah. That's why in our world, this is the car, because whether it's a car where there are significant consequences to you not managing your own energy use and that you'll run out of gas on the side of the 405 freeway, or this, and you'll be, God forbid, not connected, for a few minutes, and if you think about this in terms of the change it does to the energy industry, let me tell you, let me try and hit you with another thing. I'm sorry to go on like this, but if I gave you three numbers, 6, 31, and 111,299,864, how could you work those three numbers into a coherent sentence?
I think I'm going to let you do it so that we make it to Q&A.
There are 111,284,964, whatever I said, Americans between the age of 6 and 31. Why is that important? I mean, and that's close to millennial, but not. 31 is the average age of the first-time homeowner in the United States, which means that if you serve the stationary environment like we traditionally have, that's the first time we care about a human being, is when they're 31 years old. 6 is now the average age of the first-time owner of a phone in the United States. 67% of American kids have a phone before their 7th birthday. And I know every parent in the room saying, not my kids, but it's true. So don't lie. So the telecom industry is fundamentally important to the electric industry because we have to learn how to serve this, and whether it's wireless charging like we heard about last, or what's really exciting to me, and if I were much younger, I would be saying, led by Africa, there are 4 billion people on the face of the earth for whom distributed solar is now, who have no ready access to electricity, for whom distributed solar is now the cheapest and most accessible form of electricity. 1.3 billion of them which are in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. Man, how exciting would that be to be the person that sort of penetrates that market and brings power to them in a way that sort of enhances their life, increases their prosperity, and doesn't get them doing what our generation did, which was, build coal-fired power plants.
Well, with that, I think it's time to turn it over to a few questions. So if you'll raise your hand, please state your name first and ask a question. I see a hand over here.
Hi, I'm Russ Holstein, and I really appreciate your approach to this, but I'm fundamentally puzzled by the fact that you opened with it's going to take disruptive technology to change the way power is generated and delivered, and it's not going to be the incumbents who do that. Aren't you putting yourself out of a job? That it's not the incumbents who are going to make the change, that it's going to take disruptive technology, and the CEO of a major energy company, aren't you looking to put yourself out of the job, or do you really think your company can be that transformative?
Well, I've got a multifaceted answer to that question. One is, and look, I wouldn't begin to believe for a second that I'm any Steve Jobs, but isn't that exactly what Steve Jobs did to the Mac when he developed the iPod? Or iPad? Yeah. If you think disruption is coming to your sector, and I know Eric Schmidt at Google has talked about that. I heard him at actually a forum of CEOs where he said, I just wrote a book and I went around the country. With the pace of change in the world today, almost every company out there faces some sort of existential threat in the next 5 to 10 years. And what Eric Schmidt said was that he was astonished by the number of companies that were just burying their head in sand and ignoring it, maybe because the CEO had only 1 to 5 years left in their career or something like that. And And I'm not willing to ignore it. So, I mean, look, we are trying to be a leader on the change. And, you know, over time, if the centralized grid system becomes less and less important, becomes the backup system that it should be in the 21st century, that will hurt our, you know, our conventional form of power generation. But if that's the world where the world's going, that just pushes me to want to, you know, move our company faster in that direction so that, you know, the shareholders to whom I report will see that the new parts of the business, the growth of them are making up for the slow decline of the old parts of the business. Again, it's like long-distance fixed-line telephony. You know, it's almost over for that part, but, you know, AT&T milked it for 20 or 30 years.
Another question? And I see right here in the front.
Hi. John Tuff. So we talk at our company a lot about just tangible energy, so EVs, solar. They get a lot of news and press because people can understand them. And then here comes the Nest in the home. You know, how do you look at that?
How do I look at the Nest?
Yeah, how do you look at the
thermostat?
Nest with the data and the possibility that Google is now capturing all this information about a home kind of behind the meter?
Well, I mean, if I was a software, you know, person, which I so emphatically am not, but I mean, the person that develops the killer, you know, platform for home energy, I mean, the Nest is sort of the, you know, the first salvo that, you know, everything's going to become automated in the home. You know, John, are you a parent? No. Okay, well, John, when you become a parent, you'll find out that the idea of energy conservation, you know, for generations of Americas, I mean, you know, like my father before me, I go around the house every night and turn off the lights after my, you know, 5 children, you know, go to bed. They just can't do it. I don't know. But they manage their energy consumption, and they're sensitive to how much data they're using, but they don't, you know, they think that the electricity that comes through the walls comes from God or something, and that they don't have to care about it. But I mean, inside the home, the person that controls that platform, again, is going to basically, from a profitability point of view, I think it's going to be the same as Microsoft Windows, right? And the way that the microgrids will all talk to each other in the future and bring in power when they need to, sell power when they have to. And I think the really cool microgrid, whether it be business to business or business to home, is the one that's going to manage the 4 things I talked about before. It's not just going to be about energy, but it's going to be about fresh water production, what you did with your waste, and hopefully it will tie in. Someone within the next few years is going to invent something in the home to make electricity in a sustainable way on a non-intermittent basis that will supplement solar power, and then people will be able to tell their grid power provider to get lost. But that all has to be managed, and so I think that inside the home is completely where it's going to be.
Farshad from NRG Energy. Do you see the traditional model of energy industries already slowing down? And if not, when do you think that's going to happen?
I'm sorry.
Like the traditional model of energy and how the businesses in energy sector are working, like you mentioned, the old part of the business is slowing down. Do you see that happening already? If not, when do you think we're going to see a significant
Well, you know,
shift?
electricity, as you know, is a fundamental supply-demand business, and the United States, as a post-industrial society, the coefficient between GDP growth and electricity demand growth, as we've transformed into a service economy, has gone from, you know, 1.5% electric demand growth to 1% GDP to 0.5 over the last 30 years. So now it's broken completely. And the pace at which, you know, the dirty secret of the electricity industry is that while we provide power, I'm talking about conventional power now, 7 times 24 to home, industry, and commercial, the only place you make money is in home. And you only make money in home 5 days a week, 16 hours a day. And if Nest and other people start sort of smoothing that out, you know, and, you know, the general, you know, conventional view in our industry is about 25% of the electricity used in the home is wasted. And one of our biggest markets is Texas, and Texans love to consume, and they don't want to hear about conservation and efficiency. But if you say to a Texan, hey, do you want to be like Californians and conserve and be efficient and have lower per capita energy consumption, they'll be like, hell no. But if you say to them, how do you feel about air conditioning a room in your house to 68 degrees that you absolutely know no one will step in for 12 hours a day? And they'd be like, well, that's stupid. Who would do that? Well, you're doing it every day, And as soon as Nest-like stuff is in the house with sensors and everything, and that's all being managed, the profitability of the core business, I think, suffers. So it's not just that per capita energy consumption. The United States has now peaked in 2007 and has not come back. Since then. But with more automation, more sensors in the house, the pace at which that 25 to 30% waste just gets taken out of the system will exceed any natural demand growth. And that's why I would say the traditional electricity system, even before you get into the inroads that will come from home solar and other things that get people not to use the grid, even before that, it's a declining business. And then if the 35 million American homes that should have solar on the roof get solar on the roof, then it's a fast declining business.
So we're going to end on decline, but we also heard.
Oh, there must be something positive we can say.
Well, maybe you can suggest really quickly what will happen as that decline occurs. I think that actually leads to a really positive moment in terms of what we can do to provide more renewable sources potentially, correct?
No, look, you all self-selected to come here, and I just have to say, again, if it's about millennials, it's just an incredibly exciting spot to be in terms of being able to, if you believe like I do that the capitalist system is going to solve this problem, you can be incented by the profit mode, have a good living, and save the world. And there's rare in human existence that you don't have to engage in a lot of personal sacrifice to do something that benefits society around you. And you all have that opportunity now. So I think your interest in this area is right on target. And good luck to you all.
It's a much more positive place to end. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Here we go.